What is up, everyone? Welcome into another one of our NFL DFS DraftKings Advice videos, this time for Week 6. We are coming off of a relatively injury-filled Week 5. Hopefully, this week is significantly better. We have some buys, so a smaller slate in terms of only 10 games. I am your host, Justin Bales, joined by Ben Hostler and Sam Sherman. Prior to getting anything going on this pod, we have a giveaway. $250. It is meant to bump up your sports betting bankroll from the Karma DFS and Bet Karma, but $250 for you. All you have to do is go down to the giveaway section in the description, click on it, and then there are a few things that you can do to get multiple entries into this, and then someone will be picked for the $250. Completely free to do, no issues with that whatsoever. But Sam and Ben, how are you guys doing today?
I'm doing good.
Benjamin.
I'm doing good. I'm ready for week 6. We had a nice juicy debate before the pod here about Chase Claypool. Apparently, I'm way higher just from a real life football perspective on Chase Claypool than like everyone else on the world. So we had a nice debate there. But I'm doing good. I'm ready for week 6. Sam, how are you?
We don't need to go too much into it because he's not on the main slate, but just so everyone knows, Ben did say he is a top 10 receiver if we were to draft again right now.
Top 10.
Which is like wrong, but I guess we can quote unquote have a discussion, but we won't. Yeah, I mean, Ben, I thought you would lead off with I guess maybe I was more tilted than you. I have not been that pissed after a slate this past Sunday than I was like, oh my God. Saquon, what even happened? Did he literally trip on someone's foot? Like, I don't even understand what happened.
He like ran into someone and stepped on their foot wrong, and it twisted his ankle.
Yeah,
he buried Ash. He buried my main lineup. That was just
dude. That's how my luck's gone this season. I've picked the wrong 2v2 the last 3 weeks, and then last week, like even in picking the wrong 2v2. We still have a chance to win because we have pretty low on Saquon Barkley, and then that happens like right at the start of the game. So yeah, that's how my luck has gone.
I was
terrible.
I literally had like Brady, I had Evans, I had AB, I had Najee. Like I had this just like rocket team, and then Saquon is just fragile. God, you know what? Just gonna get mad again. We should just move on.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, I was in the same boat as you guys. I stacked the Giants and 3-person stack. Saquon knocked out with an ankle injury. Daniel Jones knocked out with a head injury. And then I also, the third person was Kadarius Toney, who obviously ejected for throwing a punch. So I stacked the Giants and ended up with a total of 3 players that were out of the game by the end of it. So that's just kind of how it goes. But we can get into it for this week. As always, if you enjoy our content, please give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. You can turn on notifications by clicking the little bell. I do want to incentivize you guys. I know we're doing a giveaway for the $250 this week. If you guys are posting comments, tell us your favorite player, your favorite stacks, any questions you guys have or anything, just interacting with the video with the thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. Maybe next week I give away a free month to our premium core plays. So just a little incentive to hit some comments on this or hit the like button. Just so if you guys give us the interaction, we'll give you guys some free stuff. I feel like that's relatively fair. As always, we have free content at dfskarma.com. You can go to betkarma.com to find all of our sports betting stuff. We also obviously have premium content, which is our core plays that Sam does. It's just incredible projections and everything. That also falls under the premium subscription as well. That can be found at dfskarma.com or in the description below. Just hit the little show more. You'll find everything that you could possibly need. I think that is enough, and we can get on to this week. So we will start at quarterback, go through position by position, end up on stacks, and then some bold predictions from the 3 of us to finish out the podcast. At quarterback, let's start with Sam. Who are you looking at?
I think like since it's obvious like these top guys are, we know that like, you know, Mahomes, Lamar, good plays. I think while I do like them a lot, my question to both of you after I kind of give my maybe one more is if maybe this is a week, and I feel like I've not done this in a long time, is this a week we can actually maybe double stack Lamar because I think everyone single stacks him, and I think he's an elite play. Obviously, despite the good defense, his production is insane. I'm a notable Lamar hater, so I'm wrong. He clearly is a stud. But besides, Lamar, Mahomes, and Mahomes is obviously in a great spot facing the Washington defense, which has not been very good, on top of the fact that their defense sucks so bad they're going to be throwing all game. I think those two are elite options at top. And then I'll save what I think will be Ben's play under 6K. I think I'm just going to go right back and continue going to Joe Burrow. I mean, I just love how it seems like even with Mixon back last week, I was good to see them throwing. It's what they should be doing. And he's not, quote unquote cheap. And I think this is the first week with the buys and this London game, whatever, we'll actually finally see some kind of more condensed ownership that we haven't seen this year. It's been pretty spread out, but I think Burrow is an elite play against the defense in Detroit that just stops absolutely no one. So those are probably my top three.
Ben, how about you?
Yeah, Sam covered it pretty well. I love the top guys in Mahomes and Lamar this week. Talked a lot about Lamar on the cash process yesterday with AC, which you can watch on the same YouTube channel. But I think, after that Monday night game, he's going to be chalk, right, at home. Expected shootout against the Chargers. He's not overly expensive, 7,400. So I think he's probably the cash play for tournaments. Love Mahomes. I love that game. Highest over under, so it's not going to be a secret. But Sam and I have kind of been targeting the Washington football team for a while here with how fast they've been playing. And I think, it's a good get right spot for the Chiefs offense, especially with Clyde out. Maybe that boost them, throw the ball even more than they have been. So I like those guys at the top, and Burrow's my favorite mid-tier play as well, Sam. Pro Football Focus has the Lions as the number one worst coverage unit in football, and we've kind of been targeting them and targeting that secondary for a few weeks now. We did it with Kirk Cousins last week. That didn't necessarily work out, but I don't know. I mean, you kind of know that possibility is there when you play the Vikings offense because Mike Zimmer, that they like to run the ball. So there's always the possibility that happens. Burrow, they've kind of let loose the last couple weeks, and we liked him a lot against Green Bay. I think you can go back to him in tournaments, and then I think for cheap, Taylor Heineke is probably my favorite at 5,800 on the opposite side of the Chiefs. I know AC and I talked a lot about him yesterday as well, but I think most people will focus on the Chiefs side of that game. And Heineke has upside, right? He came through us a few weeks ago against the Falcons, 28 DraftKings points. He's went over 20 in 3 of his 5 games. And I don't think he can play any worse than he did last week. And he still mustered out 12 DraftKings points. He completed under 50% of his passes for 248 yards, 2 picks, no touchdowns. Still got you to 12 because he can run the ball. And the stat that I brought up on yesterday's video was I know that they just faced Josh Allen, so it might be skewed a little bit, but the Chiefs have given up the most rushing yards to quarterbacks this season, 240, and it's really not close compared to the second. So I think it's an underrated spot for him to get going with his legs. I don't love the Chiefs linebacking unit, so I do think that's an underrated part of his game for cheap. So I like Heineke as my favorite cheap play.
Well, this is relatively boring. You guys hit it perfectly. Nothing really else that needs to be said too much. I mean, Lamar Jackson, obvious. Patrick Mahomes, obvious. If you're spending down, Taylor Heineke is my option. My favorite GPP play is Joe Burrow. I mean, that's kind of what it is. The one thing that I will say about Heineke and the Chiefs giving up that many rushing yards, when you look at who they played, Josh Allen, they played Jalen Hurts, they played Lamar Jackson. They've also, even to a lesser extent, have played Justin Herbert. Their entire season has lined up for them to be giving up a ton of rushing yards to opposing quarterbacks, but it's also showed that they will do it. So when you have another kid that can run like Heineke, it just adds to the fire. I will quick offer a very, very cheap option and then more of a game theory play here, just so you're not getting the same exact stuff from basically all of us. Game theory 1, Darrell Henderson, probably one of the highest owned running backs on this slate, I would assume, in that matchup. So why not attack Los Angeles's passing? Matthew Stafford, you can obviously use him with someone like Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, and then just hope that either A, New York has the ability to keep this game at least close enough that they're willing to keep throwing the ball with Stafford, or B, that by the time it gets out of hand, that Henderson's not the one that's taking the touchdowns and Stafford has had them himself. So you have a really high team total for the Rams. Stafford's under 7,000. I mean, you can obviously pair him with an elite player like Cooper Kupp, and you're going to get it at low ownership with Henderson obviously taking all the chalk. And if you wanted to, you could stack Stafford, Henderson, Kupp, and eat the chalk with Henderson in case he's the one that scores, and then still get the rest of the offense. And then the salary relief option that I would consider would be, and I don't necessarily know how great I feel about him, but Mac Jones at 5,200 obviously gets the matchup against Dallas. If you guys didn't know, Dallas is leading the entire NFL in air yak allowed. So it just seems like a reasonable spot for a quarterback that we know has the ability to throw it 40 plus times in a game. Even though he hasn't produced well at 5,200, it's not like you need a ton. If he gets a couple of touchdowns, flashes 20 plus point upside, I think that Mac Jones is at least relatively viable. How do you guys feel about either of those two?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say the Stafford thing I like a lot. That's like it didn't work out, but it's the exact same game theory as kind of last week with the Titans. It's exactly what was my thought too. It's like everyone's going to play Derrick Henry. It's like, why not play, Tannehill in the passing game? I like that call. The Mac Jones one, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, he hasn't been like a superstar or anything, but to your point, yeah, I mean, he's averaging like 41 dropbacks per game. So not that he's been lighting it up, but yeah, I mean, Dallas has given up 25, 26 DraftKings points a game to quarterbacks. We know that the Cowboys offense is insanely good. And so they should be probably trailing because the Cowboys are a much better team. So I like that call. I mean, I don't know. I mean, like, would you go there in tournaments? It's always so tough, as you know. I mean, even with like Jacoby Myers and he gets a lot of the targets. It's just tough. Like, I think last week, he threw to like 8 different receivers. So it's just really hard to stack him with anyone. And the upside is just, I just don't know if it's there, but I don't dislike that call.
For me, Jacoby Myers is the guy that you definitely pair him with. I know last week he only saw 5 targets, but prior to that, he was in the double digits. And then I do think that you can, if you want to target like someone like Hunter Henry, outside of Travis Kelce this season, like tight end is so wide open that getting basically anything that you can from a guy like Hunter Henry, and we know no one's going to play him. I feel like that's the viable route. Ben, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, Mac, I think we would need just to wait and see. I haven't checked their injury report, but on their offensive line, like they were missing, I think 4 last week.
Yeah.
So I would just wait and see on that. I do think Stafford completely viable in tournaments, and then I wanted to add in Herbert as well. I think most people will be playing Lamar, but you certainly can play Herbert. I mean, Baltimore's given up the 4th most passing yards in football. I think Herbert's top 5 or 6 in fantasy scoring right now. He's averaging 27 DK points per game, which is, more than a lot of other guys that you would think. It's almost 5 more points than what Dak Prescott's averaging. So I think he's going to throw the ball. I think that game is going to probably shoot out, and most people will be on the Lamar side. So definitely, I think we have to add Herbert into the pool, and it might be someone that I end up putting on one of my main tournament teams, to be honest.
Yeah, that's a good call, especially after last week. Like very few people, maybe Anthony being the only one that was dead set on stacking that Cleveland game. But in hindsight, it makes so much sense that essentially, obviously, Cleveland was going to find success with, I guess you should have said either Nick Chubb or Kareem Hunt. Both of them performed well then. But then Herbert can throw against anyone. So that type of game, it definitely makes sense to utilize someone like that. We can move to running back. I feel like this is one of the I don't want to say weirder positions, but I feel like it's a little bit open. There are a few players that I feel really interested in using, and a few different ways that you can go. And I feel like depending more so on ownership throughout the week. It's kind of going to dictate which ones you're going to use in cash, which ones you're going to use in tournaments, because there's plenty of players, at least in my opinion, that if their ownership would shoot up, I would feel completely comfortable playing them in cash. But if they're going to be low owned, I don't think you have to, obviously. And then that's a great tournament type of play. So, Ben, start us off here. Who are you looking at running back?
Yeah, so the first thing you'll notice when you go to set your lineups at running back is all like the questionable players. So I just want to note that there could be value that opens up. Like we're doing this video early in the week. Last week that happened with Dalvin Cook, ended up getting ruled out on the weekend. Obviously, everyone played Madison. I wrote it in my article, but there could be some value that opens up here as the week goes on. So just something to keep an eye on. As far as favorite options, I want to say, like, for tournaments, I really like the Browns backfield. So I think it's going to be really windy. You'll notice the totals dropped on this Browns Cardinals game a little bit. Kyler's banged up now. I think that the Browns are going to come out and do what they've done all season. I think they're going to feature Chubb and Hunt pretty heavily in this game, especially if their defense is as banged up as it looks like it could be heading into that game. So I think they're going to want to try and dominate the time of possession. You don't want to play those guys in cash games because they're both so involved. They play pretty close to the same amount of snaps, but I think for tournaments, either one of them can work. As far as cash games, like we should get Darren Williams out of the way. Like I'm assuming, or Darrell Williams, I'm assuming he's going to be pretty high owned. I mean, would you guys agree with that? I mean, he's 4,900, highest over under.
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I mean, I think I would be shocked if he wasn't the highest owned. I know that KC doesn't really run the ball, but, like, I don't know how you really avoid that. I mean, like, I assume a lot of people might prefer Devontae Booker. I don't, but I think
do you have, like, ownership projections or too early? Because I'm just curious, like, what he would be at.
Early. I don't really have, I mean, like, cash, I think is a different, I mean, Darrell Williams, I wouldn't be surprised if he kind of is like reaches like that 20% threshold, but I don't think it's going to be like a 50% thing just because there's just a lot of value other places. And so, and there's no like Derrick Henry, there's no like, there's no Bills and things like that. So I don't know, I mean, like, would you say that, is there anything would get you off of him in cash? Because I don't think there is for me.
As of now, no, but we'll see what goes on as the week goes on. So for cash games, I think you're looking at him. I think you're looking at these mid-tier guys like Jonathan Taylor, Darrell Henderson. Bales mentioned Henderson earlier. You could throw Taylor in as well at 6,600. Big favorite against Houston. We know he has the big red zone role, and you would assume that they're gonna give him his touches if they are winning. So I think that's kind of the pool, and then you would add McCaffrey in as well if he's healthy. We'll wait and see on that as the week goes on. And then for tournaments, I named the Browns guys, and then DeAndre Swift, man, I feel really, really good about him this week, especially if you're playing, the Joe Burrow stack. You can run it back with Swift, given how involved he is in the passing game. I mentioned on yesterday's video, since he is tied for second in receptions allowed to running backs this season, only one off the Bucs who allow the most. So I think it's a underrated spot for him in the passing game, and that his role isn't going to diminish. Even if they get down big, which is definitely a possibility. So I really like DeAndre Swift at 6,300 as well.
Yeah, I think you outlined that really well. The only thing that I'll add, and this is kind of what I was referring to before, is there being so many options, specifically in cash, that like ownership's going to have to move off of some of them to make them elite tournament options. I think you can add Austin Eckler at 7,900. That's still a little too cheap for his floor, especially against a team like Baltimore. So add him to the cash pool as well for me specifically. And Sam, what are you looking at? I guess anything different for running back or any other tournament options that you like more?
Yeah, I mean, I think someone who will go, I think two guys will go under owned. I think it's kind of the same thing every week with Dallas. Is I know like the sentiment for a lot of like was that like Zeke sucks, but like clearly he doesn't, and he's just getting a lot of opportunities. I know the New England rush D is pretty good, at least in terms of like fantasy points. But I just think it's an auto hedge because he's getting the ball a lot. I mean, if you look at, the main slate, you look at, opportunity share for running backs, Zeke is in, top 5 or 7. And I think that's just not cheap, but he's, he's less than Chubb, who's in, Zeke, is quote unquote in a timeshare, but he just is getting a lot of those kind of high value touches, which I reference my article all the time. The other guy I'll say is Antonio Gibson. I was super worried about him too, but kind of the same vein of people being worried about it being all pass heavy. I know JD McKissic is there, but I like Gibson in that his, they're playing probably like a 60-40, 65-35 snap, split, which is not ideal. But if you look at kind of the opportunities and value opportunities that Gibson is getting, they're a lot more worthwhile than that McKissic is getting. And he just is stayed pretty steady in his involvement. And so those are both tournament plays only, but I would say I like those a lot. And the third guy I'd add is, maybe I just play him every week, but Chase Edmonds, like, it has to score eventually. He can't get leached by James Conner every week. I just like his floor. I think he has the upside. He gets the ball more than you think, and he's getting a lot of targets, which we know are much more valuable than carries. And so I think he is probably too cheap given his passing role, but it just his range of outcomes is so large, which will always keep his ownership low.
You have something to say, Ben?
Yeah, before you go, I love that Sam brought up Zeke and Gibson. So like a lot of times, like on Twitter and like in the DFS space, people like they want to talk about how like Pollard is on the field so much, right? McKissick's on the field on third downs. But while that is the case, like a lot of what goes into it is what these guys are doing when they are on the field. And when these guys are on the field, they're getting the ball. Like Zeke is, if you look at just overall rush attempts, Derrick Henry is lapping the field at 142, but Zeke is 5th and Gibson is 6th. Like these guys are 5th and 6th in the entire NFL in carries, but all you hear about is J.D. McKissic and Tony Pollard like get on the field, right? But when those guys are on the field, they're getting the ball. Zeke also super involved in the red zone, right? 6th most rush attempts inside the 20. So all that matters is they get the ball when they're on the field, and those guys do. So you can definitely play them in tournaments.
Yeah, I mean, just to back that up with like the actual, it's like, you look at the, red zone inside the 10, whatever, inside the 5, Zeke has 63% of the carries, Pollard has 13. Or you look at their opportunity share in the game, Zeke's at 60, Pollard's at like 38. And so, yeah, Pollard could score and reach touchdowns, but yeah, like I completely agree. I mean, like the usage, it's like the same thing we always talk about, why I think that the stat that I read a couple of years ago, I forget who said it, but when you look at tight ends and like, targets per route, it's like, it's such a big outlier for the guys who are just in there to block versus the guys that are running a route. So I agree with you there. I think Zeke is just under-owned every week.
Yeah, no, I also agree with you guys. I think the other thing to add, just based on what you were talking about, of Chase Edmonds having to eventually stop getting his touchdowns leached, I'm not sold on that one. I do think Chase Edmonds, if he scores, I think he has to score from relatively far out. If you look at it, and it's regardless of how I feel about James Conner, because I do not think that he's a great player at this point in his career. 7th in the NFL in red zone carries. He is 4th inside the 10 and also 4th inside the 5. It's like AJ Green. AJ Green is, I think he has 6 targets inside the 10. Doesn't make any sense. It's more than DeAndre Hopkins. It's more than Rondell Moore. It's even more than Christian Kirk. It doesn't make any sense. But until teams change that, and James Conner has consistently been moving up and up and up, so it's not like they're going to change it anytime soon, at least in my opinion. With that said, I still think Chase Edmonds is a good play because he has such a role in their passing attack, and I think this game could stay really close. But as for the touchdowns, I do think you kind of need to be more on the quote-unquote luckier end versus, having a guy like Zeke where once they get inside the 5, he's touching the ball. That's kind of the weird James Conner thing. But I think you guys outlined running back. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, it's funny. I agree with you. I mean, I guess it's almost like it's like a question for you and kind of a statement by me, where it's like, where's the threshold where it's like worth the risk? I mean, like I was saying earlier, like I write in my article every week, I always reference that high value touches. That was betted by Ben Gretsch who used to work at CBS, and it's just crazy to me. It's like, leaders on this slate in high value touches, you have Swift at number 1, and then you have Austin Eckler, and then you have Chase Edmonds. Like, it's like almost crazy that they have this usage, but like, you can't ignore the fact that you said, I mean, Edmonds has 9% of the carries inside the 5. That's probably like 1 or 2. Yeah. So it's like, I get it. it's crazy to me. You just would think with his passing role, he would be more effective, but it's hard to say week to week what he'll do.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. It's tough because I wish they would just give Edmonds a bigger role because it feels like clearly he's the better back.
I know.
But you guys outlined this extremely well. My favorite tournament options are probably either of the Cleveland guys. I like both a lot. I don't think you should be playing them together. Obviously, they take away from each other's ceilings, but both of them do have the ceiling. The only question that I guess I would ask you guys, and I like the matchup. I hate the roles. You have Denver against the Las Vegas Raiders who struggle against the run. Javonte Williams, I want to play him so bad. But Melvin Gordon is so pesky, taking more of the carries. I honestly can't believe it, especially with how well Javonte Williams has showed early in his career, that he's not just taking on a larger role until he's the featured back. But I think Melvin Gordon's 5,100, Javonte Williams 5,000. Do either one of you have any interest at all in, I would assume, Javonte Williams over Melvin Gordon, but do you have any interest in either of the two, or are you just off because they're basically just splitting carries of sometimes what's a limited backfield?
Go ahead, Sam.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't know. The split sucks, but I definitely have Javonte. I think they both see around the similar amount of targets, some opportunities ever, but I think the Raiders' run defense it sucks. And I like that even if it's a small edge, if nothing else. I mean, Javonte Williams does have a few more carries, I think, inside the 5, inside the 10. And I just think, I mean, Bills, this is like a total not quantitative way to look at it, but I just feel like Javonte Williams is just better and more explosive. And I would have more, I think his upside is higher than that of Melvin, but it definitely is thin given the Broncos' obsession with using Melvin Gordon. I don't know why he has a job. Yeah, whatever.
Ben, what about you?
I hate Melvin Gordon.
So if you guys want to play someone from that game, what about Josh Jacobs for a little bit more than those two?
Okay.
This is if you want me to sell you on him, like just over those guys. One, he doesn't have to deal with someone being as pesky because when he's been healthy, he's been getting the ball. And if you look at his last 2 games, 5 targets in each of them, 9 catches. He's always we always talk about this, like he was a great pass catcher at Alabama. That's kind of what he was known for. And he got to Vegas, and that's not what they have been using him in. And then recently that's changed. Now we have this whole coaching drama going on. So he could have a completely different role this week. Like, we don't know. Like, they could start throwing to him like they have been the last few games. And 5,900, I know it's a tough matchup against Denver, but I mean, Najee Harris has a really bad offensive line, and he had success in this matchup last week. So I know that's only one game. Like, I don't want to read too much into that. But we talk about how usage can outweigh matchup a lot of times, and we're talking about tournaments anyways. So I would be willing to bet on Josh Jacobs continuing this passing game success. He doesn't have to worry about someone vulturing behind him. I think he's going to get red zone work. So I actually am kind of interested in him for tournaments if you want someone from that game.
I think it's reasonable. I get your reasoning behind it. I don't hate it. It's just that it's so hard for me when you have a slate like this where there's so many good running backs that aren't going to get ownership. Nick Chubb, you have Kareem Hunt right above Josh Jacobs. Like,
yeah, I like Kareem Hunt more than him.
Bad back.
I like Kareem Hunt more than him for sure. But I mean, is he bad though? I don't think he's bad.
Ownership matters, but like I can't responsibly play Josh Jacobs for 5,900 when Darrell Henderson is 6,000.
Yeah, but we're talking about tournaments. Like, you have to make plays that are gross. I mean, Anthony almost won the Millie Maker with David Njoku. He was literally the only person in the contest that played it.
David Njoku.
Dumbest line I've seen in my entire life.
But I'm just saying, like, also, you have to make gross plays in tournaments.
No, I agree with you. I get what you're saying.
What you said is not wrong, and he has, I mean, not a quote unquote like bell cow like a Najee or a C-Mac, but yeah, he doesn't really have competition. I mean, I will say, Ben, to your point, I agree. He has been getting like a pretty steady stream of targets. I mean, even in that game versus, I I forget where, sorry, a couple weeks ago, but where for some reason they just were pounding him into the ground and just throwing. I think it was against the Chargers. I mean, he's getting the targets. I mean, he's I think averaging like 4 or 5 a game. But I guess I just don't know if he has like a viable enough ceiling for me, unless he scores like 3 inside the 5 or something. That's my opinion.
But I think he can do that.
Yeah, I mean,
you're not going to
did.
predict touchdowns, but I mean, remember last year, week 1, he's massive chalk. And I think he scored 3 touchdowns. They were all like close ones, if I remember correctly. Maybe it was 2 touchdowns, but he definitely can do that.
Yeah. No, I think in terms of him being bad, I don't necessarily mean his talent's bad. I mean, it's a tough situation. Like you could see he averaged under 3.5 per carry in each of his first 3 games. It's not like you're not going to use yards per carry to determine how good or bad a running back is, but you can use yards per carry to determine how good or bad a situation plus their talent level is. At least I think that you can in terms of, I guess, specific to the matchup and everything. But before we move to wide receivers, once again, I do want to say we're giving away $250. Click the link in the description. All you need to do is follow a couple of steps. Each step that you complete will give you an entry into it. You don't have to do ones that you don't want to do. It's very easy stuff like follow the Twitter, just things like that. And then also subscribe to the channel, comment anything that you want below, ask questions, any comments, your favorite players, anything. The more engagement that we get, the more likely I am to be able to give out a free NFL monthly pass next time we're on the podcast. So highly recommend, just give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff. But moving to wide receiver, this is a very interesting slate. I feel like there are a few options that really stick out. And then you're going to have to make some decisions on just if you're spending up guys like Tyreek Hill and Devontae Adams, you're not going to be able to play both of them. So especially in cash, you're going to have to make your decisions there. Sam, we'll start with you. Who do you like at wide receiver?
Yeah, again, I mean, I think I'm always in the obvious. I mean, Devontae Adams is averaging 13 targets a game over his last 4. That's a lot. So I think he's a pretty good play. I would say, I mean, I guess my question is, how many more weeks can I lose money on Robbie Anderson? I think we're going to do it again. I mean, eventually he'll do something. I mean, dude, I will say, I think it's an interesting one, like you said, because I think the obvious plays are what they are. They're obvious, but I think, I get he'll be less owned, but Keenan Allen is $1,700 less than Mike Williams. That to me seems a little crazy. I mean, he's averaging 10 targets a game. Mike Williams averaging around 10 targets a game. So I like Keenan Allen a lot. I like Tyler Boyd after a big Jamar Chase kind of T. Higgins involvement game. And I was kind of joking, but also not. I mean, I think Odell, although he has not been that effective and Baker's missing him and he has all these air yards, nothing to show for it, he's obviously probably way too cheap, 51. But, I mean, Robbie Anderson, if we're just talking tournaments, like purely like just explosion game, like 4,800, like is probably too cheap just for what he could do. So I think he's interesting in what I think is my gross GVP stack of the week after a horrendous Darnold game. I think that could be an interesting stack. But I would say those are my kind of favorites that are not, the obvious studs, like the top 5 price guys. But I just think this week for me, if I'm not playing one of those, like those guys are good cash plays, I just think I'm really going to try to be a lot of these guys like a Robbie or take like Justin Jefferson and maybe a Thielen after Thielen did almost nothing last game. So I think that's the route I kind of want to go this week with a lot of expected chalk up top.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's smart. Ben, who are you looking at receiver?
Yeah. So Adams, Tyreek, like we don't need to talk a ton about those guys. Like they're obvious plays. My favorite high price receiver this week is Mike Williams. I like Herbert, which I just said. Mike Williams is the alpha, man, and I love Keenan Allen, and Keenan Allen's really good, and he can be they both can be really good the way that they're playing this offense. Like it's entirely possible, but he's just been the guy, and no one wants to play him, right? Like if you look at percentage of air yards, like Mike Williams is up there, top 6 or 7 in football, and everyone, to Sam's point when he was going over receiver, everyone's going to play Keenan Allen. He's 6,400 compared to 8,100. right? People will want to talk about like, oh yeah, we want to target the middle of the field against the Ravens. Like this Ravens defense this hasn't been the normal Ravens defense of years past. Like they've been getting beat by receivers. Michael Pittman Jr. is a big guy, similar to Mike Williams. And what did he do against them on Monday Night Football, right? Like he had a really nice night. I think Mike Williams' ceiling is worthy of the $8,100 price tag. His ownership is going to be so much less than Adams and Tyreek Hill, and we're already interested in that game. So I really like Mike Williams, and I really like Jamar Chase. I tweeted about him today, but he's top 5 in air yards overall. Detroit gives up the second most air yards per completion in football. I think it's a really good spot for him. Again, another guy I'm not worried about the price hike with him because his role in his offense warrants that price hike, right? Like you might be paying like a little more towards the ceiling, but he has that upside, and that's what you're chasing in tournaments. So I don't care about those guys' prices being up. I like him a lot. Hollywood Brown, I think, is chalk at 5,900. Really good cash game play. I think both Tony and Jacoby Myers, I think, are good cash game plays as well. Dallas still gives up, bottom 5 in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. He's still due for a touchdown. Got tackled at the 1 last week. I don't know like what this guy has to do to score a touchdown, but like it eventually it's gonna happen. And then the Tony stat that I brought up on the cash process was I was stupid for not playing him. He was in my 2v2. I chose not to use him, but which was stupid. But the Rams are similar to the Cowboys, and they allow a ton of yak to opposing players, and that's what Tony does, right? Like he's a yak guy, and I think even if Shepard and or Slayton come back, he's too good to not be on the field, right? Especially with what he did last week. So I think he's fine, but I think like as far as cash games go, like Hollywood Brown's gonna be really high owned. T. Higgins, I could see getting some ownership at his price, but I really like Chase and Mike Williams. Like I think that's my 2 favorite receivers this week.
Yeah, you made a lot of good points. A lot of guys that I was planning on going over for mine. Last week, I played Tony basically everywhere. I really liked him. The Yak matchup was perfect. Now he gets a matchup against the Rams, who I think rank in the bottom 6 of the NFL in Yak allowed this year. So once again, I will go back to Tony, assuming that he's in the lineup. I also really like Jacoby Myers. We already talked about Dallas allows the most air yak in the NFL. And then when you have a guy that is going to get double-digit targets potentially, that's never really a bad play, especially when it's as cheap as someone like Jacoby Myers and due for touchdown regression. So he's just in a really good spot. The only part where I will disagree with you is assuming he's healthy. Tyreek Hill is my number 1 on the slate. When you look at air yards allowed, Washington is the only team in the NFL over 1,000 on the season. They're the only team on the slate over even 850. So the next closest would be the Detroit Lions at 842. Washington's at 1,001. I mean, Tyreek Hill, we know that he's going to beat you deep. It's going to be very tough for that type of a defense to stop what he can do. He, I believe, has over 40% of Kansas City's air yards on the season, and at 8,500. What?
Yeah, 42%. I was about to say that too. It's crazy. Yeah.
Yep. We already know when you want to look at pure ceiling of a wide receiver, very few receivers can hit 50 fantasy points. Tyreek Hill did 2 weeks ago. He also has over 40 already on the season. So when you put him in a matchup against the team that is allowing the most air yards, and it's not even close. The second most in the entire NFL is the Seattle Seahawks at almost 100 less than Washington. It's the perfect matchup for Tyreek Hill. And I will say, generally, when that perfect matchup comes, it does not go the way that we expect. But I will be taking the shot on Tyreek Hill. What's that?
The only thing I'll say, though, Bills, is are we kind of like bearing the lead here? I mean, are we not going to play Terry, who has almost 50% of his team's air yards?
Yeah. Heineke.
Say that again.
Heineke, Terry, and Tyreek Hill. That's the stack.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. And I think that McLaurin's fine. It's just when you look at the pure air yards allowed, Kansas City's allowed slightly under 800 it's just the difference of how crazy Washington's defense has been in terms of what they're allowing versus the rest. Terry McLaurin, 100% fine with him. As even if you stack, like say you stack Patrick Mahomes with Tyreek Hill, bring it back with McLaurin. 100% cool with that. It's just, I don't know. Hill is in the spot of all spots this week, in my opinion.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, Bales, at the beginning of this video, I said that Detroit was the worst graded coverage unit by Pro Football Focus. Washington is second worst. So yeah, it's a great matchup.
That makes sense. And then the other guy that I actually wanted to talk about, and this is kind of funny because you outlined him as well, Jamar Chase. When you look at Detroit, obviously they're giving up the second most air yards on this slate specifically. They're third behind Seattle also in terms of on the entire season. And then you have Jamar Chase, who I'm guessing the kid doesn't have too many issues seeing the ball without those stripes at this point, right?
Yeah. Comical.
So Chase is where it's at. I do think that there are a few other options. I like all of LA's guys: Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, Van Jefferson. Van Jefferson, I think, is a very solid. Yep. For under 4K, under 35. Yeah, that's really really cheap.
Runs a lot of routes. He just runs so many routes for 3,400.
Yeah. I think all three of those can be very good options, but I think that about does it for wide receiver. We gave you guys a lot to think about, just a ton of really good plays, and it's going to be pretty difficult to go wrong here, in my opinion. But moving to tight end, which outside of Travis Kelce, obviously, if you can spend up and get him, 100% feel free. I don't feel like any of us need to really mention too much about him at this point. But Ben, go ahead and start us at, it's less than ideal, I guess I would say, with it being so bad this season. But who are you looking at here?
Yeah, so I think we can get it out of the way. Cash games, you're going to play Ricky Seals-Jones. It's the highest over-under. He played every snap except for one last week. For some reason, DraftKings decided to leave him at 3,000 despite playing all those snaps, despite seeing 8 targets. So you're going to play him in cash games. Now, outside of cash games for tournaments, Mark Andrews certainly is a great play, right? 5,200. You feel like if that game was on the main slate and not Monday night, he would be more than 5,200 this week, right? Like he would be much more.
Oh, easily,
absolutely.
Yeah,
he was 55 on Monday.
Yeah. So he would be much more expensive if that would have happened on Sunday. The Chargers like to sit back. You can beat them over the middle of the field, so I think it's a good spot for him. I think he's a really good play. Outside of him, I don't know, like I feel really good about Ricky Seals-Jones. I know, we don't like to play chalk tight ends, but I just think it's like a clear misprice. So I'm probably going to be overweight on him, even though he's chalky. I'm probably going to be overweight on Andrews. I don't really know. Any other of these guys are just like shots. I think you could play Noah Fant.
I have some takes.
All right, I'm excited to hear your takes, but I think Noah Fant makes sense always, especially if you are playing Josh Jacobs in a lineup. You can use Noah Fant on the other side. Tyler Higbee, I think you can use every week as well at 4,400, but I don't know. I really like Andrews. I really like Ricky Seals-Jones. Everything else is just like dart throws for me.
I'll say my one thing I'll say about Kelce. Everyone knows he's a good play, but I will say, doesn't he seem, compared to what he's been this year, 7,000 feels like you're getting a huge discount.
I completely agree.
He was up at 85 earlier. I think.
So I will say, it's really hard to double stack Mahomes. You always should try if it's viable and the rest of your team isn't dusty. But not that I am not going to play Tyreek, because obviously his ceiling is probably the highest of anyone on the slate who's not a quarterback, or actually probably including quarterback. But Kelce, just at that discount you're getting, quote unquote discount for, he doesn't have probably not the 3 touchdown, 250-yard game that Tyreek has. He just is so involved, and I think that's just too cheap for him. These are, when I said I kind of takes, I was kind of joking, but as part of stacks, Bales, you mentioned earlier, I think Hunter Henry will go, he's not like a lock, but under owned, because I think people will play Jonnu Smith given the price discount, but Jonnu Smith is kind of, I don't know why the Patriots paid him all this money, but he's just been blocking. Hunter Henry's been the one fullback. Yeah, so I think he's good as part of a stack. I wouldn't really play him like a lot of these guys. I never really play like I try to avoid playing one-off tight ends outside of cash just because I think it makes more sense with the stack. But CJ Uzoma is really risky. I've noticed something. I was reading with this. I'm not saying he's a lock, but in a way to get different, if the Bengals stack it's chalky, he has been running the routes, and Drew Sample is in there sometimes, but Uzoma is like not really blocking compared to what Sample does, and he's playing a lot more snaps. I like him, and I like the last guy I'd say is part of like a Viking stack. If you believe in a Vikings coming back, I mean Tyler Conklin is actually seeing like 5 or 6 targets a game over the last couple of weeks. He's still third in the pecking order, definitely, but I don't mind, if you're going Kirk and Jefferson to pivot from Thielen and use Conklin. I think he is viable, at least in the red zone, and he's pretty cheap too. But those are kind of the guys I would say I like as part of those stacks. Does anyone know, is Max Williams out? I thought he was like done for the year.
Yeah, he's out.
Mm-hmm.
So
who's their next tight end?
Well, so what they did.
We don't want to do that.
No, we don't want to do that because Kyler with the shoulder injury, it definitely worries me. Like the fact that he popped up on the injury report with that. But what they did when Max Williams went out, I don't know if it was just because it was that game, but they just went back to what they were doing last year, which was playing a ton of 4 wide, which is why Rondale was on the field so much. So I wouldn't be shocked if they did that again. But I don't know. With Kyler banged up, that worries me a little bit, especially because it looks like it's going to be pretty windy in Cleveland on Sunday.
Yeah, I forgot about the collar injury. Actually, that's a good call. I mean, I don't know. The only thing I was wondering if you guys were to. I will say I do not even think he's good, but apparently Jared Cook is here to stay, and I would not hate him as part of a stack with Herbert instead of using. I mean, you save money, but also just get different. He seems to just catch touchdowns all the time. And I guess Donald Parham catches a touchdown every week too, but Jared Cook is kind of cheap for his role.
I think Cook's fine. I think for me, it's basically Travis Kelce. If you're dropping down Mark Andrews at the next tier, Hunter Henry, and then at the next tier, Ricky Seals-Jones. That's probably as low as I'm willing to go. But we can move on to our stacks very quickly, give a bold call, and we will wrap this up for you guys. For me personally, I mean, when you're looking specifically at like the game stacks, it's very clear that Kansas City, Washington, and then the Kansas City, Washington, and the Los Angeles Chargers, Baltimore Ravens, those are the 2 games that you're basically going to stack. Outside of that, I do think that the Los Angeles Rams, especially their passing attack, make a good tournament stack. And the Cincinnati Bengals are another stack that I do really like. Ben, are there any stacks that really stick out to you this week?
Yeah, my 3 are one I already said, which was Heineke, Terry McLaurin, Tyreek Hill. You could use Kelce if you wanted instead of Tyreek Hill, especially if you want to talk about a team that's terrible in coverage. That obviously bodes well for Kelce as well. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and DeAndre Swift. And then I think I'm going to go Justin Herbert, Mike Williams, and either of Hollywood Brown or Andrews. I think Brown will be more owned, so I guess I would pick Andrews in that. But I don't know. I think I'm going to be heavy on the Chargers this week, the more I've kind of been looking at it throughout this video.
I like that. Sam, what are you on?
I kind of alluded to earlier. If you want like a super, I know it's contrarian. It'll probably burn me, but I liked all the stats too. I really think, given how bad he was last week, he looked like old Darnold. If you go Darnold, DJ Moore, who's been a freak, Robbie, who by the way, I was on team watch the tape. I literally saw Robbie, that ball that was thrown out of bounds. Robbie was legitimately, there was no one within 30 yards. Like he would have gone, and I would have won some money. So I think if Darnold, more Robbie stack with like literally coming back with, literally whoever, Justin Jefferson or whatever, I think is really interesting and will be owned by 0.0% of people.
Yeah, that's interesting for sure.
Darnold hasn't been a dumpster fire before last week. That's all I'm saying.
No, Darnold actually is. So living in Raleigh, I get to watch Carolina. Darnold looks relatively good. Last week, he was missing a bunch of throws that he normally makes. But Bold calls. Are you going Robbie Anderson is going to score like 50 fantasy points? Or are you going something just different for your bold call?
No, so since that's my bold call every week and never happens, I'm gonna not have my bold call, and then maybe we'll do a little reverse action. My bold call will be that. Oh, okay. Chase Edmonds and Jacoby Myers score a touchdown this week. Ooh, like that.
I like it.
That.
Ben, bold call.
Yeah, you guys know where I'm going. BMW, not 1, not 2, 3 touchdowns for big Mike Williams this week. Let's go.
I like that. I will go with Jacoby Myers, sets season highs in every category, 10 receptions, 100 yards, 1 touchdown.
Yeah, him scoring a touchdown, that is a bold call.
Oh, out of here with BMW.
Oh, BMW, baby. Let's go. Matt, if you're watching this, I know Matt will appreciate that bold call.
Yeah. All right, that's all we got for you guys. Once again, for the third time in the video, $250 giveaway in the description. Click the link, follow the steps. Super easy, completely free. Also, like, subscribe, turn on the noties if you want. Comment anything you want below. We will be answering questions all throughout the week. The more engagement you guys give us, the more likely I am to be able to give you guys a free monthly next week. So I mean, a lot of reasoning to do that for you guys. DFSkarma.com. You can find all of our free stuff, all of our premium stuff as well. You can get in our Discord at chatdfs.com. That's free, but there are premium channels as well. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and good luck in week 6.